So let us continue with our analysis of this concept of sample. So I was giving you this example of a whole bunch of flags. So this could be our population. As I said, the population could consist of objects. And once again, all I need to do to get a sample is get a subset of this population. So all the flags in this column here could be considered as a sample. And so can all the flags which end up in this little rectangle. Or it could be all the flags that I pick up here and there and everywhere. And you may want to start thinking about, well, which of these three examples is actually better? Well, you might think that this last one is probably better because I ended up, randomly picking them. But notice that each one of the flags I've picked include a cross in them. So, is this a good sample or a bad sample? We're going to look at this issue later on in the course, but for now just remember that any one of these subsets that I picked, they're all samples. They have different features, they're chosen differently and so on, but from the statistical point of view they're all samples. Okay, so any subset of the population whatsoever. Now with relation to that, again, just to let me emphasize that every subset that you can think of is a sample, okay? But not all samples are equally good. And what we mean by that is going to be seen later on. As I said, we're going to spend quite some time on the idea of what is a good sample and how do we collect a sample that is good for our purposes. Alright, so now let's look at another basic word that we're going to be using quite a bit in this course, and that's the word variable. Well, what is a variable? Well, as the word says, it's something which is going to change. Change from what? From element to element of the population. So once we look at the population, each element, they're not all going to be equal, right? If they were equal, then we wouldn't do statistics. Statistics does look at variability. But more technically, what do we mean? Well, a variable is simply any characteristic of the elements of the population that is not the same for all of them. Okay, so anything that we can look at and is not the same for every element of the population, we're going to call it a variable. Associated to a variable is something we call the values of a variable. Okay, so what are they? Well, these are simply the possible options that can be observed. Once again, in a later lecture, we're going to be focusing on this whole idea of variables and values and so on and try to understand what they are. But for now, let's just say, and we're going to look also in class at many examples of values for a variable. But basically, the values are all the options that you can observe. Just to give a very, very simple example, if I'm looking at one variable that would be the age of students in my class, then the possible values are the ages that the students can have. So most likely I'm not going to get anyone, or I'm sure I'm not going to get any student who is 5 years old. I might get someone who is 17. Probably I'm going to get someone who is between 19, 20, 21 or something like this. So these are the values. Now, what do we mean by data? Data is another word that is used quite a bit in statistics, and by data again we're going to mean any set of values that we have observed from a sample. So we collect a sample, we observe the values of the variable for the elements of that sample. That will constitute the data. Okay? Data can actually reflect observations of several variables, but it's pretty much what we've observed. And once again, we're going to see more details on this later. Okay. I'm going to stop here. It's a shorter video, that's okay. And then we're just go to the last one to finish off the jargon for today.